Hi, you guys. This is Richard Sachs. I'm the host on Lost Arts Radio. Nice to be with you again. And we have a great show tonight. Dr. Michael Christian, who is a very unusual optometrist. And I want to read a little bit about his background because it gets into a lot more than eyes. And I was fortunate to become aware of him and his work through our friend Celeste Solom at this new site, celestralreport.com. Definitely worth checking out. And I'm going to read just a little bit of Michael's bio because I think part of the initial discussion that we have could be on clarifying this. He's got so much that's of great interest here, and it's going to lead us into other areas of discussion. So what I've got down here in notes is Michael Christian is a man with gratitude for an amazing life of observation. And as you know, observation is like a key element of real science. And as long as it's without preconception and you're willing to find out whatever's true. And it says this has led him to study many of the life sciences and philosophies to facilitate not only himself, but his fellow human beings in the wondrous treasures of life to discover their meaning and purpose. And practically is an optometrist, cum photosomatic physician, PhD, having 27 years of experience in vision health. And vision is connected to a lot more things, as we'll find out in a few minutes here. The primary directive with his work is to focus life and its fullness thereof. So the eyes being kind of a microcosm for the focus on a bigger scale. And we'll see what all of that actually means to Michael and what other subjects he wants us to get into since they're all connected. So welcome, Dr. Christian. Really nice to have you here, and thanks for the time.
Lovely to be with you, Richard, and thank you so much for inviting me to your show, and hopefully the viewers will, plus myself, will find some new things out today.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I think it's nice to start, since I like to include the people who have no idea what we're talking about, as part of this, and not just the people who are most up to date, but a little bit about your background and what got you into your current interest, going back whatever number of years is required for that, what got you into the interest in vision and eyes and their relationship to the bigger meaning of that whole field.
It's a big question, and I'll try and keep this as concise as possible. I grew up in a family my mother was very determined that I was going to become a medical doctor, and eventually I did get into medical school, and that was in Basel, Switzerland. Okay. But it just wasn't my thing. It just wasn't coming together. Prior to that, I'd become a pharmacologist, cell biologist. I actually worked at the Ludwig Institute for Cancer Research, and they had various research places around the world. Okay. And I found myself also doing research in Ciba-Geigy, as it was in those days, and then it's become Novartis, so the big hub of pharma. And I feel I've been very well looked after over the years, even though some people would think, well, what are you going to end up doing, Michael? Mm-hmm. And so what actually happened was I got into optometry at the age of 30. And because I tried medicine, and then 1 year before that, a year just before I started optometry, I'd actually done a year of veterinary school at the University of Zurich. Part of my background is from Switzerland, and the other side is from the UK. I was born here in Australia, so a real mishmash, a richtige mishmash of different backgrounds, and trying to work out who I was in the middle of it all. Yeah. But in actual fact, it was such a big mix of things. It was almost as though, all right, how are we going to put this all together? And I remember I was once at a luncheon table, and this person said to me, Michael, have you ever thought of optometry? And many years ago, I had, but I thought, oh no, there's too much maths and physics. I don't want to get involved in that. And but the funny thing was, I have, and the curious aspect of it is that it's led to a new model of vision. That is where the eyes are basically the beginning, but how that focuses the rest of the body, and that has brought in not all, but a lot of quantum physics applied to the biological sciences. Now, the thing is with all of this is that, sometimes things aren't going as well as you would probably like them to be going, but really that has been big background for me to really be directed into seeing what we need to do and what we don't need to do as far as this is concerned. So I started my degree in 1989 and I graduated in 1993. And in the United States, people, if they do optometry, it's an OD, Doctor of Optometry. In Australia, it's the same training, but we get Bachelor of Optometry or Masters, etc. And so I finished in 1993. And then within a month of that happening, my first wife, she had a massive stroke in front of me. And you can imagine, the world was turned upside down. And I felt as though I was doing 48-hour days between locum work and looking after her.
Right.
And it led me into the realm of neuro-optometry or neuro-optometric rehabilitation, because one of my professors, he was really gifted in this. And we had never been given any formal education as far as that was concerned in our optometry course. Mm-hmm. But I gleaned so much out of that. I started to realize, look, there must be so much more. If eyes are the beginning, if the eyes are basically the outgrowths of the frontal lobes, right, surely there must be some form of neuroplasticity. Surely if we can look at the eyes in relationship to how they affect not just to be able to see things, in as much that for typical eye examinations, you go into the optometrist office and you look at charts and cards, and they'll do basically checking the health of the eyes, both for the front of the eye, the back of the eye. We've got fancy machines like optical coherence tomography. We've got all different types of things to look at. And we're looking
as a side note, asterisk and footnote, explain to people what you mean by neuroplasticity, because everybody might not understand that.
Well, neuroplasticity is the ability to facilitate the nervous system to rearrange itself. That's it in simple terms. And what that means is that if you give the appropriate stimulus to whatever nervous component, whether it be the hearing, whether it be vision, whether it be tactile sensation, if you can effectively train it into a new habit. Now, you don't, in the way how I'm looking at things from a quantum perspective these days, is that you don't force the system, because for every action there'll be an equal and opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. But bring the system to the possibility of its own threshold. In other words, this might be new for, let's say the eyes to see in a different way. But if we're not forcing it, but supporting it and allowing it to investigate, for want of a better way, then it may say, yeah, I like that. That's different for me. And in that is to support it so that that becomes part of the behavior of the visual system in this case. But what I want to say with all of that is that neuroplasticity is not just located just for the visual process. That can affect the posture, that can affect the balance, that can affect movement, that can affect feeling, that can affect all different types of things. And this is what the discovery of what I've been doing over the years, in seeing that when you are focusing or facilitating a focus of a person, it's not just their eyes, it's their eyes with mind and body. They have to recognize what they're seeing, and it's an awareness, and the awareness is from the being. It's not just the doing. And so I remember many, many years ago, because I write prolific notebooks, I remember buying this notebook in Basel, Switzerland, and it was almost as though I went into automatic writing, and I just drew across like that, vertical, horizontal, and I called the vertical the stationary and the horizontal the dynamic. What I didn't even realize at the time is I was creating a hologram of stillness of being and yet the dynamic of doing. And those two are basically complementary with each other. They're not separate. Today, we're so caught up in the doing of things, and that's noble in the right way if we do it in the appropriate manner. But how much of the being, how much of the meaning, how much of the presence of who you are? It's like when you introduce yourself to people, most people say, well, what do you do? Rather than who are you? Now, that might sound
Right.
funny because we tend to be so much more directed to what's the function of this person, even though we may not think of it that way. But it's the expression of being. And this vertical and this dynamic is such that in the work, in the simplicity of that cross, so to speak, it's as though that stillness of being, hence a lot of people are into meditation more so these days, so that their dynamic of doing is coherent. Because if we are not present in our being, we're more likely our doing is not going to be as effective as we possibly can be.
Right.
And initially, this led me, when after graduating and the issue with my first wife, and I just started, my mind was in, I wouldn't say hyperactive, but it was highly dynamic. I'll say it that way.
Okay.
I was observing things in new ways. I was reaching out. I was questioning in new ways, in manner that we had not been taught at school. I'm not saying what was taught at school was wrong. It was the material-based model of vision, everything that we could measure, everything that we could put into a certain category. And from that position and from that point of where that's all happened, this led me to looking at not just, well, what may be wrong, but what are the possibilities? And that the possibilities are actually a springboard from the problem. And so I talk about, and particularly today, of what I call quantum confrontation. And what quantum confrontation is the application of awareness to observation, as what you brought out in the introduction for me, Richard. Mm-hmm. And the observation is that if I come from a position I know, then I limit possibilities of showing themselves in their unfurling. But if I'm allowing myself, and I love that word allow, because that comes from the old French word allouant in the 14th century, which is to uphold, which is to honor. And what are we upholding and what are we honoring? And that's our being. I have a little way of describing things with patients. We want to facilitate the well of being, and that well of being, hence your well-being. So the deeper the well of being, hence your being, and you draw out, you're going to do well. So it's playing around with these words. Mm-hmm. And so we have become, particularly in the Western way of thinking, we have become very directed to how things function, how their mechanics are, and what they do. Good. But that's incomplete as far as I'm concerned.
Well, in optometry, it was all whether or not the eyes were creating a clear image, and that was about it, right? And you took that the larger context.
Correct. And so let's look at optometry. The field itself has just exploded. When I mean in a good way. It's gone from just putting lenses in front of people's eyes to looking after the visual health. And today the focus is much more on disease, whether it's macular age-related degeneration, or whether it be glaucoma, whether it be a whole variety of different types of eye anomalies. Now, right. That's well and good, but what about the functional dynamics? And look, we have phenomenally good behavioral optometry, or in the US, it's called developmental optometry, and looking at interrelationships. But I wanted to create a model, and I first started off looking at light being coherent. And so I would think about, well, what's a hologram? And hence the holography. And holos is the Greek word for whole, mm-hmm. and graphia, picture. And it's all a big picture. Now, we see bits and pieces initially, but those bits and pieces, do they all connect up with each other? Are they separate entities? And so one of the things which, say in a typical eye test, look at the reading chart, and it's usually black and white, but mm-hmm. life is not black and white. And it is of a 2 to 3 degree field in a 240 degree field. We're focusing that point focus, so to speak, as rays coming to that point, the fovea centralis, in each and one of our eyes. It has the highest discriminatory ability of the rest of the retina. And that's good. But what about the bigger picture? What about the context? What about the perspective? Where is that perspective with respect to the detail? Do those connect with each other in a phase flow complementarity? Now, there's a lot of words there, but what I'm saying is the timing coherent between what you're seeing to where you're seeing to how you're seeing and when you are seeing, and all these conjunctions, if they all come together, the whole system starts to regroup itself and direct itself in a new manner. Hence, coming back, that is when you present new information or modulate with a lens or even a prism, which I'll come into soon. When you do that, it's bringing the picture of what the so-called external is to the internal within. How is that external and internal interacting with each other? Is it fixed? Is it locked? Is it locked down, as we hear about today? Or is it opened up, allowing new possibilities, new opportunities, new directives? And this is where it's very fascinating, because when those start to become more connected, because with the typical eye test, it's done in a semi-illuminated room or dark, it's fixed gaze, it's black and white, there's no depth, there's no color, there's no space, there's no movement. You look down to tubes or wands blocked relative to the other, and then they open up at the last moment and do a so-called binocular balance. Add plus 0.25, that's one step of lens strength. All good in one way, but you may have two individual eyes that are so-called perfect in each individual part, but have they been brought together, all together, in the process of redirection? And usually you're in the room and there's no big picture, there's no art book outside, there's no dynamic. You're relegated to a chair. Look, it's all well meant, don't get me wrong. But the point is that we don't sit around in a dark room all day looking at a black and white letter chart.
So it's testing how good of a reader you are at 20 feet with that size letters, basically.
Well, basically we're talking about 20/20 as what the so-called gold standard is. And what's that? It's an angular subtense. It's five minutes of arc. And that's pi over 180 steradian. And then it determines, like if you think of a letter E, there's a bar, there's a white line, there's a bar, black line, and a white line and a bar. Now, that is an expression of how the detailed discrimination is taking place. But that's in such a tiny area. What about all that? And this is where it's fascinating, because the lens will focus the what. Now I'll come to the prism. The prism, as you can see here, now this is moving around. Now you can see my face is redirected. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Can you see where it's changing? Now this translocates position in space. It is realigning where to what to when. And this is when it gets really fascinating, because we're talking about space and when, time and space. How do they connect up with each other? Are they one with each other, or are they dysphasic with each other? So you might get a person looking straight at the letter chart and the reading card, and that's good. And they can do it, and they can get 20/20 or more, or 20/16 or 20/14. Wow, that's better. So-called perfect vision. But then if they get up and they're given their glasses and they get up, whoa, the spatial context is all mismatched.
Well, also they may have no ability to see in peripheral vision too and still pass the test.
Absolutely.
Also, isn't there the issue of you've got the image that the eyes translate to the nerves and the nerves take it to the brain and the brain interprets it according to certain assumptions, which may or may not have anything to do with what's really true, if you can even define that.
It's part of the story. It's a
but you beyond all those parts, you've still got the part of understanding what you're looking at.
Absolutely.
Right.
And the thing is that are we, and this is why over 100 years ago the word quantum mechanics came about, Max Planck. And absolutely brilliant. And then Einstein and Niels Bohr, and how they used to have their discussions with each other. And what I found absolutely fascinating is that Quantum mechanics, quantum, if we could say quantum is consciousness, the consciousness with the mechanics. How does consciousness, and how do we describe consciousness? Can we define it as such? Or is it an experience or an expression or a presence that is of being, that allows, coming back to that word allow, the mechanics to redirect itself? And what I'm saying is that the visual mechanics, so if we take quantum mechanics, translate that into health facilitation, or health sciences, that's what we call them today. If we can bring consciousness into vision, but not just vision, but mind and body, not that we're not conscious, but to allow ourselves, in inverted commas, to play with them, not force them, but support them, then new things can unfold. And this is what I'm saying, the confrontation, the problem that where a person may be stuck or in a state of stasis of how they see things, literally and metaphorically, can start to change. But that's an invitation. You can't force that onto anybody.
Right.
You can draw a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's whether or not the intent, and the intent is a focus of that particular person's consciousness. Are they willing to find out what's new? Or are they saying, as in Australia, look, mate, give me my glasses, just want to see the reading. You can tell me all your mumbo jumbo, but it doesn't matter. No, that's one extreme. But the other end is, Michael, I'm certain that we're going to be able to do something today. And it's, well, and you think, wow, where does that come from? It's a knowing and it's an intuition. And that intuition is not based on fear, that's based on trust. And, you know, if we don't trust, we bust. And I'm saying that in no silly manner, even though it might sound quirky, what I've just said. But it's a quality of being. And that quality of being, it's not that you're going to trust every single person and everything they say, but to test it out, yes, please do, as what the scientific model would do, so that, yes, that does work. And as I say to everybody, I'm going to tell you a few things. Now, within this hour of this consultation, if it's not happening, it ain't happening. And it's not as though, oh, this will happen, but rather it's better felt than told. Because if we bring that light into your system, so to speak, and you start interacting with it in the appropriate manner, if it stays coherent, it is literally at the speed of light. It's not just the light that is hitting the chromophore, all the photopigments, and they're translating at the speed of light. And then it's going through saltatory conduction and going through all the various nerve channels right to the calcarine sinus and the occipital area, or the back of the head. It's far more than that, because light in itself is a phenomenal field. And when we think about the electromagnetic spectrum, we are only seeing between the 330 and the 740 nanometers, if we're fortunate, which is such a tiny bit relative to the rest of that cosmic field, which is, by the way, transverse. Now, this is interesting, because this transverse field in the so-called space-time of what I've been alluding to is, well, what holds that transverse field? Might seem a simple question. But then I've been fortunate to come across the works of Nikola Tesla, as many people have. And what he talks about are scalar waves. And scalar waves are longitudinal waves. They have no phase translations of position in space. We can't see them in space-time, but they exist. He worked out various things. He even made an antenna for a car, and he went to JP Morgan and said, listen, I can drive this car without, and there's free energy. And Morgan said to him, well, if we can't put a meter on it, we don't want it. Right. Now that's interesting in itself. But what I wanted to say, here's the longitudinal wave. Here's the transverse wave. This is the realm, and I'm talking figuratively here, and abstract, but this is the realm on this horizon where we're all on this globe, as we may call it, whether you're a flat earther, whether you're a globalist, or even there's another theory that we're internally in another system. There's so many ways of looking at this. But what I'm saying is with this, is that simplicity of where things are happening on this transverse level, but this longitudinal level of infinite information and possibility. And this is where it gets interesting. It's the realm of time. The way how we see time is one whereby it's very linear. We look at past, present, and future, and they are arbitrary values for different people. Sure, we have dates, we have numbers. We've got 1900, we've got 1066, we've got 2020 as we have today, which is a very interesting time of how we see things in the year 2020, where things are really changing. But are we part of that change? Now, this is where it comes in. So a lot of people just think, oh, well, this is our time. This is what it is. It's just what's happening now.
Right.
That's all there is.
Right.
But what about the dimensions of time, or the multi-dimensionality of time? See, time, what I'm seeing in terms of the longitudinal aspect, is the realm of infinite possibility. And it is the realm of consciousness in a way. And here's something very interesting that comes with it. When Einstein was looking at how he saw himself, or how he saw an object getting faster and faster to the speed of time, it would contract to a point you couldn't see it anymore. Now this begs the question, if you can't see that anymore, if it's going so fast, and boom, what's in that realm that we can't see in space?
Yeah.
It's huge. Now, I'm probably digressing a fair bit, but what I want to say is that if we bring time and space into balance with each other, this prism, and this is a big prism, it's a 6-base prism, and I won't go too much into that, but what I want to say is that I use very fine amounts of prisms at 0.5 or 1, and what these prisms do, one level, they translate space into a different location of how we observe, or how we are aware of, or how we're conscious. But it also changes the timing of how light, in inverted commas, comes into our system. It's already in our system. Because if you consider, we may be made up of particles and subatomic particles, mesons, leptons, muons, and on it goes, and then electrons and protons and neutrons, and neutrinos, not. And how that's all together in the nucleus, and then the actual electron cloud which is around.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have all that, but that's the physical attributes that we can see. What about the unseen?
So, like almost 100% of everything is unseen at this point, right?
Yeah. Now, it's interesting. Everybody knows the equation, or have heard the equation E equals mc squared.
Mm-hmm.
But very few know the equation E is a change of time c squared, which is the scalar equivalent. Now,
Right.
if they're orthogonal, or if they're at 90 degrees to each other in complementarity, that means that if there's a change of time, the mass will change. And what's the mass? It's very interesting. If we are beings of light, it's an interesting concept, where light is particle and wave, not in duality, but in complementarity with each other.
Right.
So there's an oscillation, which I call a positive oscillation, meaning that they're in the right conscious connection. If they're mismatched, that's when the unease, the dis-ease, and the dis-ease start occurring, because they're not phase equivalent between what's coming into presence and what's not, or disappearing. But I'm saying it in as much that if we can facilitate that, the particle wave complementarity, the superposition of that becomes the mass and the field, and that mass translated into the anatomy, which is the structure, and the physiology, which is the dynamic of that structure, and that field around us, within and without, the morphogenetic field that Rupert Sheldrake would have expressed in 1981 when he wrote his PhD in Cambridge University. If those two become connected, and this is where I'm coming to right now, Albert Einstein said the sole governing agency is the field that affects the atom. Now, I used to read a lot about his works in relativity and special case, etc. And I'm not a mathematician, as I alluded to back there, but I am a non-numerical mathematician. I look at patterns. I look at how things interact with each other. And they're not stationary. They're actually dynamic. So 100 years later, this guy comes along and says, okay, if we can focus the field, we can focus the body. So we're spending most of our time trying to focus eyes, which is all relevant because we have to be able to see. We've got to be able to see the road signs. We've got to be able to read. We've got to be able to do that. That's all included. But it's beyond that. But with it, if we can focus that field becomes connected in as much that there's no dissociation or disconnection between the energetic field, the so-called unseen, with the seen of what we see here and through that visual process. That visual process then, depending on how we see things, is either one, going to disengage us or engage us or excite us or make us depressed, depending upon how we observe it. And so my first book, which I wrote, which is called In Focus, Vision, Mind and Body, started off that quantum holographic model that I have alluded to. And that means how consciousness with the coherence of light becomes connected. I'm writing a second book now, which is called From Seeing to Being, the empowering focus of presence. And that is the focus of our being. And what I want to bring forward with that is that the more certain we are, and I'll bring this also to quantum physics also, because Heisenberg had his uncertainty principle, quantum uncertainty principle, where you could, on one level, look at, okay, where's the position of the electron in that field? But you couldn't tell what its mass was, or you couldn't tell its location, or the other way around.
Right.
Now, I think of, well, if there's an uncertainty principle, surely there could be a certainty principle. And this is where it comes in with the light, is what I'm saying. If that light is at the right time and at the right place, I call that time-space coherence. And put that into practical terms, when I put that prism, whatever that fine amount of prism is in front of that person's eye, not only are they seeing better, but people might say, wow, my breath is deeper. Oh, my head feels not fuzzy anymore. Oh, I just feel totally relaxed. There's so many different things because every person is so unique. So I'm not going to say it's this or that or the other. But what I am saying is that it allows possibility to unfold itself and present itself. We may have various protocols. We have various ways of bringing forward a procedure. You know, most people, or many of your viewers, have had eye examinations and they put the lens in front. Is it better that one, or is it better that one? Is it better one, or is it better two?
That's right.
And yes, that's true. And that can be for both. That's right. And that can be for a spherical lens or an astigmatic lens or cylindrical lens. And very few people work with prism other than there is a turned eye or there is a diplopia, a double vision, whether it be vertical or horizontal or cyclic diplopia, whatever. But what I'm saying is that when you bring these together, not just one eye, not just two eyes, we have two eyes, yes, but don't have them. And I said, before, when we work them together rather than one at a time, because what's going to happen? That one says I'm boss and that one says I'm boss. So they fight with each other. Then next, invariably, when you go back, your prescription goes up. But if we work those two eyes together with both apertures open, and what I do, I don't use a phoropter head because I want to use free space. So I've created a fine carbon fiber helmet, so to speak, so it's light, with a test frame in front, and then I can insert lenses in and out simultaneously. and then how one eye with the other responds, not reacts, but responds. And once they do, and then sometimes we have to onload, as I say, and then we offload, depending upon, and here's something which is very interesting in as much that, like, some people, they're thirsting for lenses because it's like someone who's thirsting for water. Give me more, until such point you hit saturation or hydration. But once you have met that point, the system says, no, I don't want that anymore. That's too much. And then I start dropping back. And that's why I spend the time with people, because what can happen is that when we start giving lenses, yes, that might help the habituation of the problem, but it's allowing that person to see. But is that the state that that person really wants to see all the time? Or is that the state of the vision or support for that vision under the stress or stressor condition, whereby once we bring it to that point of threshold of the habituation of what's been going on wrong, and then the person says, yeah, I'm saturated, or I'm hydrated now, and then we can start dropping back.
It's very analogous to the whole drug mentality, where if your blood pressure is high, they'll give you a poisonous chemical to force it to go down, instead of thinking, why is it high, and removing the cause.
Yes.
Right. So you're talking about bringing the causality into optometry.
Yes, that's right. And now, here's interesting. So most optometrists, whether they're aware of it or not, and there are amazingly great optometrists, and I say that because, and they do as much as they can, but I've dared to digress.
Right.
Not because it's been the quest, it's been the adventure, but the adventure to find out what else is possible, rather than we are limited to a geometric optics. Now, geometric optics is important, there's no doubt. We have to have a structure. But once you start bringing in Q, quantum ophthalmic optics, the whole system, in inverted commas, comes alive.
You should bring people along with us to make sure they understand what you mean by quantum, because there's a million different meanings that people throw that.
Absolutely.
Right?
So quantum in biological sciences is that the ground of our being is consciousness. And hence the quantum aspects of mechanics, like there are various levels of consciousness. There's the physical level. There's the vital body, which is the morphogenetic field. There's the mental body, which is the directive, the thinking, the thoughts, the processes. There's the supramental body, where things come in. It's the archetypes, the beliefs, etc. Then there's the bliss body, which is quantum field. And as Amit Goswami would say, quantum field, that's the objective way of naming God. And in that field is the infinite realm of possibility. Now, these are basically different levels in our space-time thinking of how to get a handle on this. So I'm talking from a biological come healthcare professional level, not from a physicist perspective. But we can put the math to it once we get the qualities coherent with the quantities. And this leads me to this aspect. I have a mnemonic which is called QQQ, quantity, quality, quantum. And what does that mean? It means that we are so caught up with the measurement of things, the quantities. And I say this with no disrespect, but we've almost become OCD with it. But we forget about what the qualities are. And those qualities are higher orders of experience and understanding that you cannot put numbers to. Some may disagree, that's fine. If they could show me otherwise, I'd be more than interested to know.
Sure.
But where the quantities and the qualities come together, that's where you have the quantum. In other words, the consciousness. That's how I'm looking at consciousness. So
it's quantity and quality put together into a whole, which
that's
you
right.
refer to as quantum.
Now, when they are coherent, so let's translate this to, we've got this type of lens. I've got plus 0.25 in one eye, plus 0.50 in the other. That will mean very little to most people, but one's slight long-sightedness, or one's double that long-sighted. I've got a half base down prism in the left eye, and I've got one base down prism that'll still mean nothing. They're numbers. But the qualities that come from those numbers, and in the direction of where those bases are, where those lenses are, those qualities start expressing themselves. I can tell you now what those qualities are. I can tell you whether a person is over-revving their system, so they're projecting too hard to get information to come in, so their reception or their ability to be able to process that information is reduced because too much output for the input is reduced. I can tell you what the quality of a particular prism is giving, whether a person, oh, that's going to give them more of a buoyancy of being, or that's going to give them more of a dynamic of groundedness. In other words, they're not stuck in a holding pattern of maintaining the same old, and I don't mean old in a negative way, but the same pattern of habits of routine, but can modulate those things. And this is what I'm saying. So those numbers and those qualities come together that facilitates quantum, which from one moment you are in a certain pattern, but the next moment you threshold to a new pattern, and that new pattern is one whereby it facilitates what I call a coherence of newness. And what's that? That is new behavioral patterns that are conducive to good health. Now, what that means is it's not treating a problem, but it's redirecting a process. And in that redirection of that process, that person feels so much better. They're not going to be interested what mathematical equation is. They just want to feel better. They want to see better. They want to literally and metaphorically see with a different way of vision.
So is it correct to say that by what you're doing with the vision in the eyes, you're doing it in a way that doesn't just correct the image accuracy and qualities of it, but you're doing it in a way somehow that affects the whole sense of being and the body coordination and all the other functions of the organs and the comprehension and the sense of self and balance and posture and all these different things.
As outrageous as that sounds, yes.
If that's correct, then what are the basic ways that you're working on the eyes that are different from what optometrists generally do?
Well, the basic way it is that I'm looking at you as a person who has possibility, rather than I'm going to do a differential diagnosis to say, right, you're short, long-sighted, astigmatic, presbyopic, or you have this disease, you have that disease. Yes, I'm not saying they're wrong, but that's the moment in time of linear time that we are expressing that in. We're not giving the possibility, well, this person may have this in this given framework at this given moment, but let's wonder if that's the childlike. In other words, wow, I wonder if that's possible. I wonder if this is possible. Now, we're not going to be stupid about it because we're trained professionals, and we're not going to force a person to go a certain way. We're going to support that person. And we're going to check things both from the linear and non-linear perspective. And the non-linear is the realm of non-linear geometry, or what might be called chaos theory. And that's chaos theory has the seeds of order in it if we're looking for them and are patient to observe them at the right time and place. So once we start seeing those possibilities, it's not just me as the practitioner, but the participant who is also involved in this. And so I have this saying, the doctor is patient as the patient teaches. And what does doctor mean in Latin? Teacher. So the teacher is patient as the patient teaches. So every day somebody comes in and they may say, have you heard of this particular disease? I thought, then I will say, look, no, I haven't actually, but well, can you do anything? I said, well, let's find out what, instead of looking at the problem, but take the problem and see if we can start turning it into a possibility. Let's see what the mechanics are. That's the physical and also energetic. And if those mechanics can start to become more connected. Because what is disease? Disease. Unease. It's no ease. Now, we can treat problems and treat the problem as per se. Tick the box, done. But what about redirect the process where everything becomes part and parcel of the whole being? So coming back to quantum, there's the locality of the individual parts of the body, the anatomy, the physiology, etc. But there's the non-locality, and I mentioned before the morphogenetic field, which Rupert Sheldrake alluded to, of the bliss body, which has the blueprints of the organ structures. It's non-local. It's not fixed in one particular part. But let's relate that back in complementarity, not in duality. The very DNA itself, which has the building blocks. Like Bill Clinton, he gave the money for the Genome Project in the 90s. And a lot of the genetic engineers were very upset because they could only find 23,000 genes, I think it was that. Then you have a person like Bruce Lipton who talks about the epigenetics and that every gene can express itself in 5,000 different ways. So you put your 5,000 times your 23,000, you got your millions of different expressions, whether phenotypically or genotypically. You've got it all there. And for that, what that means, the phenotype means that it's expression in the environment of what we know. The genotype is what its makeup is in the physical form.
Right.
All I'm saying is that we have become very, very locked into patterns. Now, there's an expression, old traditions die hard, and there's nothing wrong with tradition. But I have a new expression which says new possibilities live well. Mm-hmm. And we want to live well, all of us. We want to listen to each other. Nobody has the infinite amount of information, but we share this information with each other so that we can facilitate one another for quality and quantity.
Could we give people a feeling of what happens when, well, I guess most people come to you, I think, originally because of a vision problem. Is that correct?
Correct. The majority come for that reason.
And then you find out that there are other connected things happening when you talk to them and do an examination, diagnose what's going on, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So at that point, some of what you do, I assume, is similar to standard optometrists. What they would do is, they work with mostly lenses and correct people's vision to what they think is normal by that kind of what you could call a crutch, or you could call it something really beneficial depending on your point of view, or somewhere in between.
Yes.
Just looking at that part, which is only the first part, I think, of what you would be doing, how does that compare to an approach like Bates was using, for example, trying to get people to change how they looked at things and not have to have lenses? What's your feeling about all that?
William Bates was quite an amazing pioneer, and he got put down terribly. And the thing was with Bates, that I've had various people come to me, do you believe in the Bates method? I said, look, it's not that I believe in it or not. It's something that this gentleman brought forward. Now, for some people, certain exercises are more beneficial, and for other people, they're less beneficial.
Right.
But one of the issues, and this is what is a very important thing, we're mainly aware on a conscious level, but we're not aware of what's going on subconsciously. So say, for example, you've got 40 things that are going on in your conscious mind, and that's what your awareness is. But you've got 400 billion other things going on in your subconscious mind and various reactions and stuff like that. You don't know what's going on until something is wrong. Oh my goodness, I got a pain in my heart. Oh, gee, what's that pain in my temporomandibular, well, in my jaw up here? Whatever.
Right.
Because that means you're going from a state of ease to a state of unease. So William Bates started off bringing forward various processes, but it was mainly on a conscious level. If we start tapping into the subconscious or superconscious even levels, we go from space-time to time-space, as funny as it may sound. Over the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years now, I've created a new process whereby I actually not just focus the actuality of a person, which is the obvious lens to bring clarity, but I also focus the potentiality. This is the quantum leap. And what does that mean? You see, we know the expression, the hip bone is connected to the thigh bone. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. Let's take it higher. This physical body is connected coherently to the field. The locality of the physical is connected to the non-locality of the non-physical. Are they phase coherent with each other? So let's go back to that aspect of the DNA. The DNA itself in the scalar realm is both an antenna and a receiver and a transponder of information that is interacting with that field. Now, if we get into the scalar realm, and I'll talk about that, I can blur a person out. Normally, a person may have -1 or -2 or +2 or -1. It goes up to 3 or 4 for some people. Academics I've seen, I remember when I was working at the University of Western Australia, they got up to -12 or something. They were just right in front of their books all the time. That's their habituation. That's what they've got used to.
Tell what units you're talking about there instead of just the numbers. I mean,
we're talking about diopters. And a diopter is a measurement of the focal length. It's the inverse of the focal length.
And that tells you how far away the book has to be held when you're reading.
No. I was just giving a demonstration that a lot of people who are just into looking at their screens all day or looking at books all day or literature, their visual milieu becomes that very small realm. They've reduced their volume of projection, for want of a better way of saying that. What I'm wanting to say with this is that that's how they've got used to things. And that's been brought up over a period of time. It gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, I've just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. What was I saying before, Richard?
Were you talking about the conventional ways of measuring the accuracy of vision and the focus?
Yes, that's what I was wanting to come back to. Thank you.
Sure.
So what happens is that we focus the actuality, but we want to focus the potentiality. So I blur a person out, and I was saying the various numbers, +1 or -2 or what have you.
Right, yeah.
I can take depending on how that body, that hip bone connected to the thigh bone or the other way around, there are certain, let's look at light in a schematic way. And the schematic way is the electrical component that's vertical, the horizontal component that's electrical, and the wave pattern that goes in and out and up and down, and then there's the propagation of light. Now, in geometric terms, we have a y-axis, we have an x-axis, and we have a z-axis, which is the propagation, that is the axial direction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, that's all good. So the body itself, I get people to do various, and I said earlier on before, if we're a superposition of particle wave, if everything is phase coherent, if we do a movement side to side, and I'm doing this sitting down, but I usually have a person standing up, and then I do a vertical movement this way. Now, some of your viewers say, here's something interesting. It will be very interesting for a lot of people. And I did this with Celeste Solom, and I said to her, okay, let's think about how you're breathing in and out. Because it's interesting, in the brainstem or the medulla oblongata, you have pulse centers, which are for the heart. You have breathing centers, pneumatic centers for the lungs, and also you have other centers for the eyes, which are interdigitating with each other, all these nerves. Now, the curious aspect of this is that if we can facilitate how those all interface with each other. So if I do this movement and say to you, all right, Richard, do the side-to-side movement and then do the up and down movement. Do you feel your breath? Now, it's a funny one. It's coming left of field, but being quantum, I'm right of center also. That's the superposition. So if we go side to side and if we go up and down, which flows easier as you breathe? Do you feel there's a better connection, the vertical, or is there a better connection, the horizontal?
Does that vary with individuals?
It will vary with individuals.
Okay.
Now, here's the interesting thing. We ourselves, if we're beings of light, now some people might say it's better vertical. So I say, right, do the palms down. This seems so simple. It's almost as though, no, it's too simple to be true. So we do the palm down or we do the palm up. And when I do this with people will say, no, it's better the palm up. And so based on these holokinetic processes, holos meaning complete, whole, kinetic, movement, these holokinetic processes, that will tell me if the stillness of being and the dynamic of doing are becoming more coherent. Now, say if it's face up, if it's palms up, I will put an appropriate prism there, or in both eyes, bilateral, or both eyes, or one eye, ipsilateral, depending upon what the situation is.
And this is going toward a lens prescription, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so you're focusing, then all of a sudden the person who comes in and says, I can't believe this, I'm breathing normal. I haven't breathed like this since I was a child.
Okay, so
no,
a question comes up about that, which
Please.
is, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'd like to not ever do that, but we don't want to lose questions that come up and get too far ahead. So the question is, basically what you're describing, if I understand it correctly, is a deeper level of diagnostic to get to a lens prescription. And by going through these movements, going through the checklist, palms up, palms down, what flows better, side to side, up and down, all that stuff. And then you take the data. Yeah, all those things that you haven't even gotten to yet. Take all that down as a profile that designates an individual condition to a much deeper level than a normal diagnostic eye test. And what my question is that the lens prescription that you come up with that system, how different is it to the conventional lens that would have been arrived at with the usual testing modalities? And if they're different and they both result in whatever else they do, accurate physical vision, how can two different prescriptions both get the vision to be accurate?
Well, they're different because the conventional one will maintain the habituation.
In other words, you'll always need those glasses.
That's right. It maintains you in that state, in that so-called homeostasis. I'm facilitating a person to say, well, do I want to change? And what are you changing? You're changing the dynamic. That's what I call homeodynamics.
Does that mean a sequence of weaker and weaker lenses if that starts happening?
Yes, that does happen. And what happens is I've seen thousands of people get out of glasses. And I'm not saying, and it doesn't mean that glasses can't be used anymore, but I use them specifically for people who want just that extra bit of performance on whatever the requirement is.
So your system lessens dependency?
In the majority of cases, other than there's some variable that I'm not finding out with them, or there's something in my knowledge that I don't know yet, and nobody knows everything. And so this is why I'm saying it's a continuous quest to discover new possibilities.
Okay.
Because look, honestly, every day I go into my consulting room, whether it be in the city or down the coast, and I don't know what's going to happen. That might sound a bit spurious, but what I do know, it's going to happen, because I'm going to have an interaction between one person's consciousness and mine. And are we going to spar with each other in such a way that we're going to have a smile on both of our faces at the end of the consultation, so that that person's happier, I'm happier, and that we see each other better off than when they walked in?
You're saying
what I wanted to say before,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The homeostasis, that's a feedback loop, that's important. That maintains. So there's a stability. But you also want a homeodynamics, a feed-forward loop, bringing forward new possibility that it can manifest. So answering your question about how the glass is going to work, yes, you want the stability. You want a solid platform. You want the ability that that person can maintain vision. But you also want them to springboard to new possibilities at the right time and place. And I'm not to tell them that. When that's going to be, that would be wrong. It's for them to discover.
Does that mean that the initial prescription would be, by conventional terms, not quite strong enough so it would encourage the eyes to adapt?
No.
Or is it going to be the same?
I support, I don't force. People say no pain, no gain. No, we train to gain, to keep the whole body sane. No pain, but dynamic, in flow. And here is my qualitative equation. Be plus do equals flow. So that means it's not just a question of can that person see, but can they move their head around? Oh, the pain in their neck has disappeared. Oh, they're breathing deeper. Oh, there's the movement of the arm forward and back is, oh, gee, it's light. It's not hurting. How did that happen? That's been like that for so long. We are focusing the field so that the field will facilitate the physiology. And once the field and the physiology start to become more phase coherent, literally and metaphorically, that person is lighter. That person feels more ease. That person is more energetic. I've seen people literally come in and they're like this,
Right.
and they're walking out sprightly saying, Michael, I can't believe this. And I'm saying, well, just experience what you're experiencing and just be grateful for that. That's all. This is about keeping a humility so that the brilliance can shine through for everybody. And this is very amazing. So that's why I'm saying I come in and observe and watch people. But there was a point which I wanted to say earlier on before, and this is in the quantum physics world. When I get that person to a point of blur, I can bring them up to, say, minus 220 diopter. Nobody wears that. So I've got these tubes on my headset, and they look hilarious. But what I want to say, I might have a picture of one here, so it gives people an idea. But what I'm wanting to say with that is that you bring them to that, what I call QSPD, quantum still point of dynamic. It's almost that quantum zero subspace, or that place in time where everything is in that moment. Everything is in that now. Not ahead, not behind, right now, to be facilitated and facilitate. When that happens, then once that potentiality or the possibilities of new dynamic can start to show themselves, and that we've spoken through a variety of different things, and it can't be spoken through this, they will need individual topics on that. But what I'm saying is that once that's done, we dismantle that, and then once we start taking everything away, and then what the final lenses are in front, and from that blur to the number of people who say, oh, wow, so the depth, the color, the space, the detail, everything, it's all one. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so I have to, this may be a redundant question. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly.
Sure.
You're giving fully supportive, full correction. It's not like the idea that I mentioned that the lenses aren't quite...
This gives you an idea. This gives you an idea of what I put onto the end of those test frames. So that's a huge amount of lens.
Yeah.
So,
got it.
Anyway, thank you.
Okay. So,
you're going to ask the question, sorry.
Yeah, okay. So if the lenses that you end up with for a given patient are full correction, so that the vision is clear and normal, what they call normal, what is the motivation for a continual lessening of the lenses needed? What creates that, rather than just it's comfortable because it's fully supported, it's not too weak? So what makes change beyond that point?
Well, we put up with a lot of things. You'll get used to it. These glasses, they're a bit difficult at the moment, but we'll get used to it. And what happens on a subconscious level, by and large, is that we're putting up with a lot of processes. And as I said very earlier on before, we don't know that those processes are going from a functional level to a lower level to a basal level to a level that they start breaking down. And once that starts breaking down, a disease starts to ensue. Where did that come from? A lot of people say, I've never been sick. But what they haven't been aware of is how their subconscious being is coherent. To answer your question, what a lot of people, look, I've had, I'll just give you one example. One lady, one young girl, she's an equestrian rider, and she could see, but it's the quality of how she saw. I helped. She came over to the US, And she won every event. She won even the adult events. Because those pair of glasses, and she wasn't riding with the glasses, because what the glasses did, they gave a transference to the actual nervous system and energetic field system, such that her posture on the horse, how she was sitting between the pommel and the cantle, how her body was in a state of ease. She wasn't squeezing the horse. I'm a bit of a horseman myself from way back. She could hold that. She could hold those reins in a manner that she was in total relaxation. Her whole body was in a state of stillness, even though the horse was doing the various motions from walking to trotting to sitting trot to canter to gallop, etc. But she was totally in a state of flow, because her stillness of her body, which was translated as the horse would feel it, because the horse, the animals, are very tactile. They're very aware. They're aware if you're tense. They're aware if you're going to be, oh no, this is going to be difficult. They can tell. They can feel it. And so what I'm saying is that to answer your question, and each person's individual, you give them the right prescription. You don't under, you don't over, but you give them what I call a quantum holographic platform, a stable platform, but you've built into it a level that it facilitates from their subconscious that they're prepared to change as time goes on. And that change is one that they may know of, or they don't even know of yet. But invariably, it's a conducive change rather than a deleterious one. And it is one that facilitates you, and it's very empowering, because that person starts to feel better, starts to feel more motivated. I have also a couple of acronyms which I call the C and AIM acronyms: sense, enable, and act. Then your body and your vision will activate, integrate, motivate. Because what we want to do is to facilitate the person to be totally in a state of easefulness, but yet dynamic. It's like when you get a new car or a new motorbike, as an example, and you want to find out what it can do. You might be just happy going 35 miles an hour down the road, or 60 kilometers as it is here. Or you might say, right, I'm going to put my foot down and see what this baby does. Wow, that's good. This is what you want to see. You want to see how these glasses are going to, they're no longer a passive optical pair of props or crutches or whatever you want to call them, but rather they're a trainer. They're a platform for possibility. They look like glasses, they are glasses, but they are the new quantum spectacles, or what I will call quanticles, which is a funny name that I've made up. But what they do is that they allow a person to have the full ability to be able to see well, but they feel their posture, they can maneuver their body correctly. People talk about hand-eye coordination. No, it's the other way around. It's not cart before the horse. It's vision, body coordination. This physical mouth is for digestion of physicality, of foodstuffs. Yes. This, the etheric mouth or the time mouth, that's the energetic mouth. That's the photo nutrition coming in. And if that's coming in at the right speed, and it is phase coherent, and it's easeful, and this is the thing, it's not just, your body's going to feel, wow, I feel light, I feel good, I'm ready to go, let's do stuff. It will actually affect your very psyche. I've seen people who are in a state of great depression become happy again. I've had so many people say to me, Michael, I love your happy glasses. No, I wasn't purposely making them to be happy glasses. I was purposely making them to be glasses that they would like to wear. So I'm not limiting it to this or limiting it to that. This is the unlimited aspect of things.
Do you usually see somebody wants to do that, or is it a sequence that they go through, or what's the usual progression?
It'll vary from person to person. Some people come in skeptical. I even ask them, even on the sheet, are you skeptical or are you open to new processes? Skeptical.
Yeah.
Fine. I'm not here to prove anything to anybody. I don't do that, because then my ego would get in the way. I'm more interested in seeing how they interact with me. Are they going to trust not me, but are they going to trust the process of new possibility? Once they start seeing and feeling and being, and hence doing and seeing, wow, That's when things start to change, Richard. That's when things really become connected. And that's very empowering. And this is what I'm talking about. It's the empowering of the being. It's the certainty to bring forward into people so that regardless of the difficult times which we find ourselves in, that even though there's flack going from this side to that and what's going wrong and so on, but who are you as a being? Who are you as a person? Who are you? Are you present? Are you in the now? And this is where I'm saying, you know, this time, it's being in the now. This is the time-space coherence. You know, these prisms, on one level, they're a spatial translator, but on the other hand, they're a phase flow modulator, meaning they change the timing. And when that time and space are coherent, the mass, the physiology, as I said before, the interrelationship between E equals MC squared. And I know it's on different levels to what most people think about. But if we are all interconnected holographically and quantumly, and people will have different thoughts and ideas about that, and there's nothing wrong with that because we're all entitled to that. But is it becoming phase coherent? Is it becoming coherent such that we can communicate with each other so much more easily?
Right.
And not try to prove things to each other, but say them, and that people can start trusting one another with an ease.
Right. Well, the experience is the best proof anyway, right, for an individual.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
If you had to bring it down to a bottom line of why people would go through this kind of optometry and this process with you, it sounds like, in simplest possible terms, the way that you're fixing the vision with the prescription and the lenses, connected with the other things, that movement and stuff that you're teaching them, is a way for not just your eyes but your whole body and life to feel better. And if that's the case, then not everybody listening to this show is in Melbourne, as you might have guessed. So
I do.
Most of our listeners are not within driving distance of you, especially if they're not allowed to go out of their houses and things like that. So,
or sailing distance.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not like once a week or something. So how do you deal with people that are far away? I mean, if they were interested in doing something with you, what would you do?
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Right. So what's the invention?
And look, what I'm saying is this. There's possibilities, and I've done this before. I have friends. Look, I have family in California. I've been over to the US many times. Mm-hmm. And I even have one particular lady who I actually did a tele-optometric process. She had a surrogate optometrist, and he was in West Covina in LA. Right. And I just asked Doug to do what I asked him to do. And he was very curious. He said, okay, I'll just start putting these things as you're asking me to do. So
Doug was the optometrist you're talking about.
Pardon?
Doug was the optometrist you're talking to.
Doug was the optometrist, yes.
Okay, got it.
And if your viewers can find optometrists who are willing to play the surrogate optometrist, and we can set up on Skype or Zoom or whatever, and then we can do things. Now, I may not be able to do everything like the aspect of the potentiality aspect, but I can do a lot which I've been doing over the last 25 years, that will really facilitate posture and movement and even thoughts, such that, and look, I don't want to make a person go a certain way. That's not for me. I want to maintain that sovereignty of that person, or facilitate that person's sovereignty so that they have the choice. But what I can say is that these things are possible. It's just creating the space so that those things can emerge.
How would people get in touch with you if they wanted to explore the possibility of doing something like that?
Well, they can contact us through our website, and that's www.microprismoptics.com.au. There is also a telephone number there, obviously, but if they send us an email, we can set up a particular time just as an introduction. And then if that person wants to go further forward, then if they can find another optometrist or optical specialists of one sort or another who'd be willing to do this, then more than happy. And then we can work out how we go about this on all different levels.
microprismoptics.com.au, right?
That's for Australia. Yeah.
Okay. And then you have a book that would you recommend that people who are interested in this get the book and get some of the knowledge?
Well, some will find it, yeah, that makes sense. Others will think, my goodness, I have to wait on every paragraph. Let me say it this way. This book is written, it's very condensed, but the new one which I'm writing will be much more expository. But the first book was really more based on my thesis, but you will find enough broad brushstroke in it. It's not just having every detail, but rather also to be able to get a feel of what's going on. And the feeling, and let's look at feeling in a way that some of the viewers may not have thought of, or may have. But look, our head is for cognition in simple terms. Our gut, where we have more neurons in that mesentery, is for precognition, hence the gut feeling, hence the intuition. This is the cognition. This is the doing. And the bottom part is the being, for want of a better. If they come together coherently in the heart region, that's the feeling. But the feeling isn't just the feeling, well, whatever, but the feeling is the intent, the directive.
Right.
So that feeling, so the emotion and the thought come together, creating the feeling. But that feeling, if that is coherent, then is going to set off the right information. You're going to get a heart-brain coherence of 0.1 hertz. If you want to see more about that, have a look at what Bruce Lipton talks about that.
Right.
And also possibly Greg Braden also. But what I'm saying with this is that once those things become connected in each other, the directive is easier. So some people can read it and understand it completely. Others, interesting, but I get it. I feel it. I don't understand everything, but I feel it. Go with that too, if you're interested. As we say, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it is now in print, has been since 2016. And now I'm writing this other one, which is From Seeing to Being, The Empowering Focus of Presence. And the first book is you can find on Amazon anyway. So that's easily done, whether you want it as Kindle or whether you want it as a hard copy. It's not too many pages, it's about 120 pages, but as I said, it's very condensed.
What's the name of the first book?
The first book is called In Focus, Vision, Mind, and Body.
Okay. Do you deal with people with degrees of blindness too?
Yes. Yes.
Because I would imagine some of them would be looking.
I don't turn anybody away. Let's say it this way. I acknowledge everybody's field of expertise. The work is standalone on one level, but it is coherent. If it's with other people's work, then they can be, and I hopefully see this as a synergistic interaction, not just additive. But if it's additive, that's good too, as long as it's not detracting.
Yeah, I mean, there's vast possibilities with this, and I think just to put it simply, for the people that are looking for eye care, what you've gotten into and explored and demonstrated in a lot of cases is how to work with the vision in a way that is more not such a narrow specialized field, but wanting to have the maximum positive effect on the whole being.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely, Richard.
Exactly the opposite of the super specialization theme in modern science of all kinds.
Well, the way how I specialize, for want of another way of saying this, is to bring together everything into coherence as well as we possibly can. And I'm not just saying that's a one-off effect, and for a lot of people, it makes a big difference first off. But then we look at other levels of requirement as we go along. So some people I will see 6 months or 12 months later, depending upon where they're at. There's no fixed timeline. There's no rule of thumb and it has to be this, but it is. And this is the point with this. If one becomes more connected, more coherent, more aware, then that person will start feeling empowered to know when to do what, when, and how, or if they do something different.
Have you put any of this in video format, like on YouTube or anything like that?
Not that much, but you can have a look at Quantum University, Dr. Michael Christian. You'll find a YouTube. You'll also find a YouTube little advertisement for Balboa Press and for my book. You'll be able to find that. But yes, it's coming to a time to do a lot of videography now, Richard, because this work is now coming into its own. Last year, for example, I was awarded with a modality that's, in other words, I created the modality of quantum photosomatics, which means it's standalone. It's quantum, conscious light body interaction. So from vision to body, the focus of mind and body. And this is a legal entity, both here in Australia, even in the US. It came through in November, that it's recognized, so it can have indemnity insurance in the United States. But obviously, I haven't got across.
So like a whole all these field of health, basically. Absolutely.
And it's been accepted, which was a big, oh, wow. I haven't had time to celebrate. It's just been too much going on. But do you know what I'm saying? It's one whereby, the groundwork is there. The platform, the foundation is there now.
I think it would be seen as extremely broad credibility by a lot of people. And new credentials.
Yes.
So,
it's, pardon?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you've got a contact form on your website, right? For people that want to ask questions.
Yes, they do. They're more than welcome to.
Things like that. Okay. It sounds super interesting. I get the feeling that we could talk for probably at least another 10 hours without going to the second subject. So maybe we'll do
maybe another time.
Yeah, that sounds another great. Time. So, I really encourage everybody to check this out, get in touch with you if they're dealing with eye issues at all, because it sounds like this is a totally different dimension than the typical optometrist appointment to see what's going on.
Well, you can imagine, Richard, when I first got in, people looked at me, what do you want to do optometry for? I said, I want to help people to improve their vision and get better. A lot of people looked at me in a very strange way, as though you're nuts. A couple of people said a few expletion deleteds, and I thought, I'm going for this. I'm given this opportunity. And it is a privilege, but the privilege is one whereby it's to serve. And as I say, look, I'm telling you everything of the possibilities. Look, there have been some interesting things happen on the way, but I'm still here to say it. And it's got to that level now. It's got to that level now. I'm not saying it's foolproof. Nothing is. Things are always in a state of change. But what I do say is that the experience is there. The heart is in it.
Right.
And I love to see people get up and go and really experience the fullness of the life that's been given to them.
It's the opposite of the conventional sequence where it's just assumed and understood that you're going to get worse and worse with time. And you're saying that doesn't have to go in that direction.
It doesn't have to go in that direction. That's what I'm saying. And that's why people seek me. And this is what's an amazing scenario for us too, because look, as you know, with the worldwide situation as it presents itself at the moment, we had to change gears, as what a lot of people have to. We're fortunate. We're still working. The numbers are down a bit, but a lot of people have closed up shop, closed up the store.
I know.
It's finished. And it's terrible. It's just awful. But we want to facilitate people so that they can see if they've got new ideas or feel stronger to be able to go through the circumstances and situations that are presenting themselves now. This is what this is about. We're here. We're an extended community. And
what happens when patients walk in with conditions like glaucoma that are generally treated with drugs in some form, whether it's eye drops or oral drugs or things? What do you do that's different, and what's happened with those type of people?
What I do, which is different, and it's very interesting. I had a professor many years ago who said, in his Australian accent, he said, drops or no drops, you're going to go blind.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
one of the things that I do, which is very fascinating, there was actually a study in South Australia about 40 years ago where they actually gave marijuana to all these glaucoma patients,
Mm-hmm.
and their visual field started to come back. And I knew straight away, as I said earlier on before, that having studied pharmacology, that's a muscle relaxant.
Right.
So let's look at it in these ways. And this is what I say: I make no claims that I can treat this or treat that.
Mm-hmm.
What I do say is I focus people or refocus them. So let's look at let's look at the eyeball and the optic stalk that comes out from the back.
Right.
Now, from the back, around the optic stalk, around that point where the optic nerve comes into the eye, are the short posterior ciliary veins and arteries. What happens in a lot of issues, and this is a lot of issues, is that those muscles around those arteries and veins are very, very tight and tensed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it causes what we call claudication of those. So there's a compromise. So the actual nerve fiber layer inside the actual retina reduces, and hence the ganglion cells all start dying, and they show certain patterns and like.
Is it squeezing off the blood supply and the oxygen?
Now we're talking.
Yeah.
Now, if we can relax those muscles to such an extent, I'm not saying, hey, your glaucoma is going to go. I can't say that.
Right.
But what I do see is that I've seen various people's visual fields look a lot different.
Mm.
And not only that, but they're happier, they're seeing better, they're much more relaxed. Now, they're still going to their ophthalmologist, and that's fine. That's duty of care from both sides. All I'm interested in is to facilitate people in the choices, and that it's conducive to their health and well-being. And what's been interesting is that now there's different forms of glaucoma. There's closed angle glaucoma, there's open angle glaucoma, there's acute, and there's low tension glaucoma. But what we're finding is that this is really a vascular disease, and that's where the major research is going into. But I'm saying with any disease or disease, there has to be a functional counterpart. Now, if we can facilitate in simplicity, and this is where simplicity meets the complexity, if we can facilitate that there's a relaxation of the system overall, it's going to a certain degree, self-regulate in a much better way. So I have another mnemonic, C, C, and C. C, clear, comfortable, coherent. You've got to be able to see, but it doesn't hurt.
So this is a deeper level of relaxation basically affects the whole body, right? And I know we have to go because we're out of time, but I want to just get a quick response on this. What do they call that condition where you lose your center field of vision and the outside? Is that, what do you call that? You know what I'm talking about? It's some kind of retinopathy. It's where
you're talking about age-related macular degeneration.
Yeah, macular
AMD.
degeneration. It's where you lose the ability to see straight on, but you can still see the edges, right? What happens? That's right. What can you do with that?
Well, look, there are different types of that, and depending whether it's end stage or whether it's at the beginning, of course,
it's supposed to be like one of the leading causes of blindness, if I remember right.
It is a leading cause of blindness, which is a real tragedy for many people. There's the normal pharmacopoeia, which can be done. There's various injections, which can be done. But let's supplement that with bilberry, which is concentrated blueberry. You can also have rutin, which comes from buckwheat, and that will close the gap junctions of the actual microvasculature. All these things are possible. But as I'm saying, I'm looking at this as a complementarity to what the conventional treatment is. And, I've seen some very fascinating things take place but there's no standard way of approach. Everyone is very individual, Richard, and you cannot just do a fixed protocol just for one. and it's the same for the other.
But that's great, because instead, there's such a huge blind spot, to use the analogy in general, in ophthalmologists or optometrists, because they want to narrow everything down to an acceptable numerical diagnosis. And what you're doing differently is looking at the whole person and consciousness even. And I think that's really exciting. I'd like to see all the fields of healthcare move in that direction. It's like an example.
It will be so exciting.
Oh, yeah.
It's so exciting.
Could happen. Okay, well, we'll have to do another chapter soon. So hang on and we'll say goodbye in the break here. So there goes Dr. Michael Christian, and really fast-moving, interesting conversation. My main hope was that it wouldn't be too technical for everybody. And I tried to figure out, when I could tactfully break in and say, and how do you define this particular term, quantum and all the other stuff that he was talking about. But the bottom line of it, I think, if I understood him correctly, is that he's an optometrist who's got a lot of background in connected fields and realizes the important concept that the body's not all these separate specialties, like in modern medicine. It's actually all connected parts. All the cells are communicating with each other all the time. Your eyes affect your breathing and vice versa, and every other part affects every other thing. And that's a real valuable consciousness for a doctor of any kind to have. And I wish that would be taught in schools now. And my involvement in the academic and scientific world, I'm seeing just the opposite direction of leading the discussion to where everybody only knows about one really narrow specialty, a really, and a lot of the stuff they think they know about it, they actually memorized about it, which is not the same. It's the whole safe and effective mentality when the opposite is the truth. So I think Dr. Christian is setting an example for all the other kinds of doctors to be more holistic. And he brought up this hologram, holistic wholeness theme through a lot of the discussion. And the bottom line is that, in a way, people with eye problems, everything is systemic. And so there's all kinds of things it's connected to that usually need to be brought back into balance too. And of course, if you live in Melbourne, you can just look him up. But for most of the rest of us, it has to be through his site, microprismoptics.com.au, and he'll communicate with people pretty much anywhere in the world, I think, if they've got internet connections. So there's a contact form on that site. You can find out more about what he does. And if you're one of those people that would like to have your vision be better, but you've got other physical things that are going on and you're taking pretty good care of yourself, but you need more insight into what things could be corrected, and maybe some of it would feel better just by dealing with the vision issue, then he'd be one of the few people in the world to talk to that would really understand the connections there. So I think it'd be good to see what he's got available. Go to the website, microprismoptics.com.au, and see what you can learn from that. And he's got a couple of things apparently on YouTube at the moment. Dr. Michael Christian, Quantum University, Dr. Michael Christian. I abbreviated that so I couldn't understand it. See what he's got there, and I think he's going to try to put more stuff out on video, which would be really interesting and valuable. And he's got his one book available. I think it's available on Amazon, Focus Vision, Mind and Body. In Focus, Vision, Mind and Body. And the other one he hopes will be out by the beginning of next year. So if he gets that on time, watch for that one too. I think that's about it. Really unusual optometrist, and somebody to learn more about, especially if you're looking for insights into vision problems. Remember, we've got a Saturday show also that's Lost Arts Radio Live, and it usually deals with aspects of what's happening in the world, current events type thing, and responses to them, and certainly a lot of stuff now about the pandemic and all the issues connected to that. And then our closed club that you're always invited and welcome to be a member of if you want to start working on deeper levels of all this stuff is Planetary Healing Club, and you can take a look at what that is at planetaryhealingclub.com. If you have questions, just email them in. see whether it's something that would be beneficial or worthwhile for you, you can write to me at richard@lostartsradio.com anytime you want, and I'll get to that as fast as I can. Also, if you want to keep us on the air, if you think what we're doing is useful and valuable, we don't do commercials, so we rely on donations from people that have the means to do that and feel like it's valuable enough to consider. Donate buttons are at lostartsradio.com, lostartsresearchinstitute.org, which is our nonprofit that controls the whole thing, and also on Subscribestar if you prefer that, subscribestar.com/lostartsradio, and we're now able to be subscribed to on Brighteon, which is a good idea because that's a non-censoring platform. It's going to be there a long time, I think. And that's Brighteon, BRIGHTEON.com/channel/lostartsradio, so that you'll get notification. Appears to be reliable when new videos come out, which is a lot. And we've got a Facebook group that's still up on for Lost Arts Radio on Facebook.com, and we're on Twitter and Gab and Parler and a lot of other platforms too. You can find us. The main coordination site to find out where else we are is lostartsradio.com, and check that out. It's got news stories coming up on it every day that you won't find on mainstream news, and a lot of other interesting stuff, links to videos, links to shows, all that stuff. So I think that's about it. Just wanted to remind you quickly about those things. I hope to see you shortly on the Saturday show, which is free, and on the private platform at planetaryhealingclub.com if you decide to join us for that. So thanks for the time. And in general, the bottom line of the message is take care of yourself, learn everything you can. It's a really challenging time in the world. There's a lot of threats and dangers, and getting worried and afraid about them doesn't help at all. But working on yourself has huge potential. And you personally, not the general crowd, but you as an individual person and listener have almost unimaginable potential. So our message is start learning about that, start using it, find out where it can go. If you get to a certain point and you want to go further, go to planetaryhealingclub.com and find out what we're doing there. And regardless, we'll see you at all the other shows and all the free archives that are available whenever you want. And thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.